The sky was dark with smoke. The ground shook with every blast. Fires burned across the battlefield. Metal and blood mixed on the dirt. It was a war zone, cold, loud, and full of death. Private Yulren, an alien medic from the planet Tishar, ran across the broken field. His armor was scratched. His heart beat fast. His scanner showed a human soldier lying alone near a crashed transport. The soldier was badly hurt, and no other life signs were near him. Yulren didn't like humans much. His people called them wild, emotional, and unpredictable. But he was a medic. His job was to save lives, not choose sides. He slid next to the human. The soldier's chest was rising slowly. Blood covered his uniform. His helmet was cracked. One of his arms was missing. His other hand held a small silver pendant with Earth symbols on it. Yulren pulled out his med kit and began scanning. "Stay still. You are injured," he said in a calm voice. The human coughed and opened one eye. He looked at Yulren with a strange smile. "You're not one of mine," the soldier said, voice weak. "But you're here. That's good." Yulren injected a painkiller and tried to stop the bleeding. "Save your energy," he said. "Help is coming." The soldier shook his head slowly. "No, it's too late. I can feel it. I'm done." Yulren frowned. "You may still survive, if we move fast." The human suddenly grabbed Yulren's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me," he whispered. "They laughed at us, at our stories, but it's real." Yulren tilted his head. "What is real?" The soldier's eyes were wide now. The old myths from Earth, ghosts, monsters, things that hide in plain sight. Yulren didn't understand. Stories for children? "No," the soldier said, his voice shaking. "Warnings. They walk among us. They've always walked among us." Yulren stared at him, confused. "Who walks among you?" The soldier's hand trembled as he pulled the silver pendant close to his lips. "We called them shadows, watchers. Some thought they were aliens. Others thought they were demons. But no one believed. Not really." Yulren paused. "Are you saying these things are here now?" "They never left," the soldier said. "War wakes them up. Fear feeds them. We didn't start this war alone." Then his eyes rolled back and he went still. Yulren checked his vitals. The human was dead. A sudden gust of cold wind passed by. Strange, considering the fires nearby. Yulren felt a chill crawl down his spine. His scanner beeped, showing nothing nearby. No enemy, no movement. Still, he looked over his shoulder. There was no one there. But for a moment, he thought he saw a shape. Tall, thin, standing in the smoke, watching. When he blinked, it was gone. Yulren shook his head and stood up. He felt uneasy. He'd seen many soldiers die, but this felt different. Back at the field station, Yulren reported the human's death. When he mentioned the strange final words, the other soldiers laughed. "Humans and their silly legends," said one. "Maybe he was just afraid," said another. "Pain makes the mind wander." Yulren nodded quietly, but his thoughts didn't stop. He couldn't forget the human's eyes. They weren't afraid. They were warning him. Later that night, he opened an old human file on his datapad. It was about Earth myths. He read stories about creatures called skinwalkers, the shadow men, and the silent ones. All stories, all told as fiction. But something about them felt too detailed, too real. Then he found a note in the file, a quote from an unknown human general. "The best way to hide the truth is to call it a story." Yulren looked out at the dark battlefield. The human was dead. But his last words were alive inside Yulren's mind. And somewhere in the shadows, something might be listening. The camp was quiet that night. The only sounds were the soft hum of machines and the distant crackle of flames from the battlefields. But Yulren couldn't sleep. The image of the dying soldier, his last words echoing in his mind, refused to leave him. "They walk among us." Yulren had seen thousands of injuries, witnessed countless deaths, but something about that moment felt wrong. Something about the soldier's eyes had felt real, deeper than fear or pain. The following day, Yoren returned to the front lines, still haunted by the soldier's warning. His fellow medics were busy patching up other soldiers, moving quickly between the injured. But Yoren couldn't focus. His thoughts kept drifting back to that moment. What if it wasn't just a myth? As the sun set, the strange feeling grew stronger. Yoren stood alone near the edge of the camp, looking out at the dark horizon. There was nothing but the smoke from the battlefield, drifting through the air like ghosts of the past. And then, as the last rays of light disappeared, something caught his eye. At first, it was just a shadow. But then it moved too quickly, too smoothly. Yoren blinked and looked again. Nothing. Was it his mind playing tricks? He shook his head and walked back to the camp. The soldiers were gathered around, eating and talking. But Yoren didn't join them. He couldn't. The images in his mind kept racing. Too many questions without answers. That night, he couldn't sleep at all. In the morning, something was different. The usual routine was disrupted. There were murmurs among the soldiers, confusion in their voices. Patrols had been sent out during the night, but they hadn't returned. The scanner showed no signs of enemy movement, but the silence was deafening. A report came through. A few patrol units had found strange tracks in the dirt. They looked human at first, but there were signs that didn't match anything Yoren had ever seen. The footsteps were too soft, too light, as if something with great speed and silence had been moving among them. The soldiers were uneasy. The camp buzzed with tension. Some tried to laugh it off, calling it a trick of the mind, a glitch in the equipment. But others were silent, their faces pale, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Yoren approached the commander. "We need to talk," he said quietly. The commander, a tough T-Shar veteran named Commander Zarek, glanced at him, then looked away. He was busy checking the battle status. "Later, Yoren. We've got bigger things to worry about." "No, sir," Yoren insisted. "I need to tell you about something." Zarek sighed. "All right. What is it?" Yoren hesitated. He felt ridiculous, even as he said it, but the words came out anyway. "It's about the human soldier." His last words. The commander raised an eyebrow. "Don't start with that myth nonsense." Yoren quickly added, "I'm not saying it's true, but we've been seeing things. I've been feeling things." Zarek looked at him closely, his gaze sharp. "You're not making sense." Yoren took a deep breath. "It's just, the patterns are off. We've found no enemies, no signs of life on the scanners. But something is wrong. Something is out there." Zarek stared at him for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "All right, Yoren. If you're serious, then we'll check it out. But don't waste my time with human fairy tales." Yoren nodded, but inside his heart raced. What if it wasn't just a myth? What if these things were real? Later that day, a small team was sent to scout the perimeter. Yoren was part of the team, even though Commander Zarek had clearly dismissed his concerns. As they moved through the forested area near the base, Yoren kept his senses alert. Every sound seemed louder, every movement seemed sharper. Then something strange happened. The team's lead scout, a young soldier named Kale, paused. He had a scanner in his hand, eyes scanning the darkened forest. "There's something wrong with the readings," he muttered. The group stopped. The air was still, too still. And then soft sound came from the trees, a rustling like footsteps. It was so quiet, so smooth, it sent chills down Yoren's spine. "Did you hear that?" Kale whispered. The soldiers stiffened. There was nothing on the scanners. No sign of movement. But that sound was unmistakable. "Stay alert," Yoren ordered, his voice low. They moved forward cautiously, weapons at the ready. The air grew colder, the silence almost unbearable. Then, as they rounded a corner in the trees, they saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, standing perfectly still. For a moment it didn't move, just watched them. Its eyes glowed faintly, an eerie light in the darkness. One of the soldiers raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the shadow vanished. It was gone in an instant. Did anyone see that? Cale asked, breathless. The soldiers nodded, but none of them spoke. They knew what they had seen, and they knew it wasn't human. As they made their way back to the camp, Yoren's thoughts raced. The soldier's warning echoed in his mind once again. They walk among us. But now, they had seen it for themselves. The myths weren't just stories, and the things the humans had warned about were real. The camp was on edge after the sighting. The shadow, tall and thin with glowing eyes, had vanished as quickly as it appeared. But no one was laughing anymore. The air felt heavier, like the whole world was holding its breath. That night, the usual sounds of the camp were missing. No laughter, no chatter. Just the occasional crackling of a fire and the far-off hum of equipment. But underneath it all, there was something else. A deep, unsettling silence. It felt as though something was waiting. Yoren lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, trying to push the images from his mind. The shadow was gone, but its presence lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He thought back to the soldier's words. They walk among us. What were they? And why had they appeared now? Had they always been there? Yoren's mind raced with questions, but he had no answers. None of the scanners could detect anything unusual. No signs of life. No weapons. No movement. But he knew what he had seen, or what had seen them. The silence was broken by a soft knock on his door. Yoren jumped up, heart pounding. Who would come to him at this hour? He opened the door to find Cale, the young scout, standing there, looking as uneasy as Yoren felt. What is it? Yoren asked, his voice low. Cale glanced around, making sure no one else was nearby before he spoke. I need to talk to you. It's about what we saw today. Yoren nodded, motioning for Cale to step inside. He closed the door quietly behind them. I don't know what we saw, Cale continued, his voice barely a whisper. But I know it wasn't. Right. Yoren nodded again. I saw it too. It was real. The silence between them grew thick as Cale fidgeted. I've been talking to the others. A lot of them think it was just a trick of the light, or something in the wind, but I know it wasn't. That thing was watching us, and it wasn't just a shadow. Yoren frowned. What do you mean? Cale looked around again, his face tense. I've been looking through old human records. There's something called the Watchers. They are said to be creatures who can blend into the world around them, almost like they can become part of the shadows. No one knows who they really are, but the stories say they've been around for centuries. Yoren's interest peaked, but he remained cautious. Are you suggesting that the stories are true? I don't know, Cale said, shaking his head. But there's something about the way we saw it. How it was so still, so quiet. It didn't make any sound. We couldn't hear it moving, but we knew it was there. And when it looked at us, I swear it wasn't human. Yoren leaned against the wall, thinking. And the soldier, he warned me. He said that they were here. He said they walk among us. Cale looked at him, confused. What do you mean? The soldier who died, Yoren explained. Before he passed, he said the same thing. That the shadows, these watchers, are real. He said they've always been here. Cale shivered at the thought. And now we've seen one. Yoren's mind raced with the implications. If these watchers were real, then everything he had known about the war, about the universe, was changing. He had thought that the enemy was just other soldiers, other species. But what if it wasn't just the enemy? What if there was something more dangerous, something hidden in the shadows? We need to tell the commander, Cale said, his voice urgent. This could change everything. Yoren looked at him with a heavy heart. Do you think he'll believe us? Cale paused. I don't know. But we can't keep this to ourselves. If there's something out there, we need to be prepared. They both knew the commander wouldn't take this lightly. Zarek had dismissed the idea of the Watchers as nothing more than myth. But this wasn't a myth anymore. They had seen it. They had felt it. The fear, the cold chill that crept up their spines when it appeared. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a warning. They left Uran's quarters and made their way to the command center. The night was darker now, and the silence was even more unsettling. As they passed by the other soldiers, Uran could see the unease in their faces. No one was talking. No one was laughing. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. When they reached the command center, they found Commander Zarek sitting alone at a desk, going over reports. He looked up when they entered. "What is it?" Zarek asked, his tone cold. "We need to talk to you," Uran said. He looked at Kale, who nodded, stepping forward. "We saw something last night," Hale began. "Something we can't explain. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything we've ever seen before. It was like a shadow. But it wasn't just a shadow. It was alive." Zarek narrowed his eyes, clearly annoyed. "You came all the way here to talk about ghosts. I told you that's just human superstition." Kale's voice grew more urgent. "Sir, we're not joking. We've been looking through records, and there's something called the Watchers. They're ancient. They can blend in with the shadows. They can walk among us without us knowing." Zarek's expression darkened. "Enough. This is a war and not some campfire story." Uran stepped forward, his voice firm. "Sir, with all due respect, something is out there. Something beyond our understanding. And it's watching us." The commander's gaze hardened, but Uran could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Zarek didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he stood up, his voice low. "We'll send out a recon team. If anything is out there, we'll find it." Uran nodded. "Be careful. These things, they aren't like anything we've faced before." As they left the command center, Uran's mind raced. The Watchers were no longer just a myth. They were real. And now, the camp was no longer just a war zone. It was a place of darkness, where something unseen was waiting the next day. The air was thick with tension. The soldiers had been on edge since the strange encounter, and now the recon team was preparing to venture out into the wilderness, searching for the shadows that had been haunting their thoughts. Everyone could feel it, the feeling that something was out there, lurking in the dark, watching them. Uran couldn't shake the thought that something more dangerous than the enemy was approaching. His mind raced with possibilities. Could the Watchers be the reason their enemies had been so elusive? Or were they something entirely different, something far older and more terrifying? The questions kept coming, but the answers remained elusive. Commander Zarek had reluctantly agreed to send out a team, but he wasn't happy about it. He told Uran that he was only doing it because the soldiers needed to be reassured. But deep down, Uran knew it wasn't about reassurance. It was about survival. The Watchers weren't just a myth. They were real, and they were already here. The recon team, led by Kale, was small, just a handful of soldiers, equipped with basic gear and scanners. The rest of the camp watched silently as they made their way toward the woods. "Stay alert," Kale said as the team moved forward. "We're looking for anything unusual, anything out of place. We don't know what we're dealing with." Uran couldn't shake the feeling that the team was walking into a trap. Every step they took seemed to echo in the heavy silence around them. The air was still, almost unnaturally so. It was as if the world had held its breath, waiting. The deeper they went into the forest, the more unsettled Uran became. There were no sounds of animals, no rustling of leaves. The only sounds were their footsteps, slow and cautious. The scanners showed nothing. No signs of life, no movement. It was like the world had gone still. "I don't like this," one of the soldiers muttered under his breath. "It's too quiet." Kale shot him a sharp look. "Keep your focus. We need to find something." But Uran could feel it, that eerie presence again, just like the night before. The feeling of being watched, as if invisible eyes were following every move they made. It made his skin crawl. They pushed forward, deeper into the forest. The trees loomed overhead like silent giants, their branches twisting in unnatural shapes. Everything felt wrong, like the very forest itself was hiding something. They moved carefully, keeping their weapons at the ready, but the silence made it harder to concentrate. Suddenly, Kale stopped, raising his hand. The rest of the team froze. Yoren's heart skipped a beat. What was it? Kale motioned for them to be quiet and pointed to the ground. There in the soft earth were footprints. They looked human, at least at first glance, but something was off. They were too light, too smooth, as if the creature who had made them was almost floating above the ground. What the hell? Kale whispered, crouching down to get a better look. Yoren knelt beside him, studying the tracks. They led deeper into the forest, moving in a straight line like the person, if it was a person, was walking with a purpose. Kale stood up slowly. We need to follow them. The team hesitated, but they knew there was no turning back. They had come this far, and now they had to see it through. They followed the strange footprints, the forest growing darker with every step they took. The further they went, the more the unease grew. The silence was deafening, and Yoren couldn't shake the feeling that something was just beyond the trees, waiting for them to make a mistake. They finally reached a clearing, and that's when it happened. A soft sound, barely a whisper, came from the edge of the trees. It was so quiet, so subtle, that at first, they weren't sure if they had heard it at all. But then, as they stood there, the sound came again, closer this time. A rustling like something moving through the brush, silent but fast. Stay close, Kale ordered, his voice tense. The team moved closer together, their weapons raised, eyes darting around the clearing. Then suddenly it appeared. A shadow, no. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something more. A figure, tall and thin, with glowing eyes, standing motionless in the middle of the clearing. It was so still, it was almost as if it wasn't even there. The figure's form seemed to blend into the darkness around it, making it hard to tell where it began and where the night ended. Yoren's heart raced, and his breath caught in his throat. It was the Watcher, the same one they had seen before, and this time it was standing right in front of them. The team froze, unable to move, unable to speak. The figure just stood there, staring at them with those glowing eyes. It didn't make a sound, it didn't move an inch. It was like it was waiting for them to make the first move. Yoren's mind screamed at him to run, to get out of there, but his body wouldn't listen. It was like time had stopped. The fear was paralyzing. Then, in the blink of an eye, the figure vanished, as if it had never been there at all. Where did it go? Someone whispered, panic rising in their voice. Kale's hand was shaking as he looked around the clearing. We need to leave. Now. The team turned and began to retreat, their eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The air seemed to press down on them, heavier with every step they took. The Watcher had been so close, and now it was gone again, but the fear remained. They hurried back toward the camp, not daring to look over their shoulders. They had seen it again, and now they knew. Whatever these Watchers were, they weren't just shadows. They were real, and they were watching. Let me know if you'd like to. The return to camp was rushed and silent. The recon team's faces were pale, their movements quick and uneasy. They had seen something beyond their understanding, and it was clear that whatever they had encountered wasn't just a shadow or a myth. It was real. The Watchers were real. Yoren walked alongside Kale, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The figure in the clearing had been there, watching them, silent and motionless. They had all felt its presence, and none of them could explain it. But one thing was certain, they weren't safe. Not anymore. As they entered the camp, Yoren felt the weight of their discovery settle in. The soldiers were still going about their routines, unaware of what had just happened. But Yoren knew that they couldn't stay quiet, not when they had seen the truth. Kale looked at him, his expression serious. We need to tell the commander. He has to know what we found. Yoren nodded. We will. But we can't just say we saw a shadow. We need proof. We need something that will make him believe us. They both knew that the commander wouldn't take their word for it. Zarek had been dismissive of the idea of the Watchers, and now, after the encounter, Yoren could feel the tension building. They had to find a way to convince him, or else the truth would remain buried, and they would be left to face the Watchers alone. Yoran and Kale made their way to the command center, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the camp. As they entered, they found Commander Zarek standing at his desk, reading over reports. His eyes lifted when they entered, and he gave them a sharp look. "What is it?" he asked, his voice cold. Kale stepped forward, his voice urgent. "We saw it, sir. The Watcher. We found its tracks, and we encountered it in the woods." Zarek raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about? Are you telling me you saw some ghost in the woods?" Yoran could feel his frustration rising. "It wasn't a ghost. It was real, Commander. It was standing right in front of us. We couldn't explain it, but it was there." Zarek didn't seem convinced. "So you saw a shadow. What of it? There's nothing out there but the usual wildlife." Kale clenched his fists. "No, sir. This wasn't a shadow. It was something more. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything we've ever seen before. It was like it was made of the darkness itself, and it was watching us." The commander didn't say anything at first. He stood there, his face hard and unreadable. Yoran could see the doubt in his eyes, but he could also see the flicker of something else. Something he couldn't quite place. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zarek spoke. "Show me." The three of them left the command center and headed toward the edge of the camp. As they walked, Yoran's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was their chance to prove that the Watchers were real. When they reached the clearing, Yoran felt a chill run down his spine. It was just as he remembered it, silent and still. The trees looming in the darkness. The air was thick with tension, as if the very forest was holding its breath, waiting. Kale knelt down, pointing to the ground where they had found the strange footprints earlier. The same light, smooth marks were still there, faint but undeniable. Zarek crouched down, inspecting the tracks. He didn't speak for a long time, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Finally, he stood up, his expression unchanged. "These tracks don't make sense," Zarek muttered. "They're too clean, too perfect." Yoran took a deep breath. "Sir, those are the tracks of the Watchers. They're not like us. They don't leave normal footprints. They move differently. It's like they can slip in and out of the shadows." Zarek straightened up, looking at the clearing with a new intensity. The forest seemed to close in around them, as if the very earth was holding secrets they were not meant to know. "I don't know what this is," Zarek said quietly, "but we can't ignore it. Whatever these Watchers are, they've been here longer than we have, and now they're watching us." Yoran's stomach twisted. The truth was sinking in, and it was darker than he had ever imagined. They weren't just facing an unknown enemy. They were facing something ancient, something that had been hiding in plain sight. "We need to prepare," Kale said, his voice steady but urgent. "If the Watchers are real, then we need to know everything about them. We can't just sit back and wait for them to strike." Zarek nodded slowly. "We'll gather intelligence. We'll track them, study them. But we move carefully. We don't know how powerful they are or what they want." The reality of the situation hit Yoran hard. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were the prey. And whatever these Watchers were, they were not afraid of the humans who had dared to invade their territory. As the three of them stood in the clearing, the air grew colder, heavier. Yoran couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the Watchers were still there, just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting for them to make the next move. The days that followed were filled with tension. Commander Zarek had ordered a complete lockdown of the camp, and the soldiers were put on high alert. No one trusted the silence of the woods anymore. Everyone knew that something was out there, and no one wanted to be the next one to encounter the Watchers. Yoran couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. Every night, he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling of his tent, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. It was so quiet that it almost felt unnatural. The air was thick, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Kale spent his days out in the woods trying to find any trace of the Watchers. They had been tracking them for days, following the strange, smooth footprints deeper into the forest, but each time they thought they were close, the tracks disappeared, vanishing without a trace. It was as if the Watchers knew how to hide themselves, to slip away into the shadows before anyone could catch a glimpse. It wasn't until the 6th day after the encounter that they finally found something. A clue, something that would change everything. Yoren was on patrol with Kale when they stumbled across a clearing they hadn't seen before. It was quiet, too quiet, but this time it was different. The air felt dense, heavy with anticipation. They moved cautiously, their weapons ready, knowing that the Watchers could be anywhere. Then Kale stopped, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Look at this," he whispered. Yoren moved closer, his heart pounding. Kale was kneeling beside a large rock, his finger pointing to something on the ground. It was faint, barely noticeable, but there, etched into the rock, was a symbol that Yoren had never seen before. It was a simple design, but it had a strange, almost otherworldly elegance to it. "What is that?" Yoren asked, his voice barely audible. Kale didn't answer immediately. He was too busy studying the symbol, his mind racing. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. "It's not just any symbol. This is old, very old. It's not human. I've seen something like this before, back in the archives, when I was studying ancient civilizations. This symbol is from an alien race." Yoren's heart skipped a beat. Alien? Could it be possible that the Watchers weren't just ancient creatures hiding in the shadows? Could they have come from somewhere else, from another world? Before Yoren could respond, a voice broke through the silence. "We've been looking for you." Yoren and Kale both turned, their weapons raised. But it wasn't an enemy soldier. It wasn't even a creature from the forest. It was a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, watching them. The figure was tall, almost unnaturally so, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness around them. It was humanoid, but its movements were strange, fluid, like it was gliding across the ground. It was one of the Watchers, but this one was different. This one wasn't hiding in the shadows. The Watcher spoke again, its voice a low hum that seemed to resonate in Yoren's chest. "We have been waiting for you, for a long time." Yoren's mouth went dry. "Waiting for us? What do you want from us?" The Watcher tilted its head slightly, its glowing eyes never leaving Yoren's face. "We do not want anything. We have already given you a warning. The time for hiding is over. You are not the first to find us, but you may be the last." Kale took a step forward, his voice demanding, "What does that mean? Who are you?" The Watcher seemed to pause, as if considering the question carefully. Then slowly it spoke again. "We are the Keepers. We were here long before your kind came to this world. We have watched over this land, its creatures, its people. But now you have awakened us, and now you must face the consequences of your actions." Yoren's mind raced. "Consequences? What do you mean? We didn't do anything to you." The Watcher's gaze softened, almost pitying. "You did not intend to awaken us, but you did. Your presence here has disturbed the balance. And now the world must decide whether you belong here." Yoren felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you saying? Are you threatening us?" The Watcher's voice grew colder. "Not a threat. A warning. You are not the first to trespass on this land, but you are the first to uncover the truth. And that truth is this: the Watchers have always been here. We have always watched, and when the time comes, we will decide who is worthy to remain." Kale took another step forward, his voice shaking with fear and anger. "But we can't just leave. We can't just abandon this world." The Watcher's eyes glowed brighter, its voice colder. "You will not have a choice. The world decides who stays and who goes." With that, the Watcher stepped back, its form blending into the darkness. In an instant it was gone. Yoren and Kale stood in the clearing, the weight of its words hanging heavy in the air. What just happened?" Yoren whispered, his mind struggling to process everything. Kale stood silently for a long time, staring into the darkness. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we've just uncovered something far bigger than we realize. Something that could change everything." Yoren looked at the symbol on the rock, his mind racing. The Watchers were real, and they were older, far older than anything they had imagined. And now they were awake. But what did that mean for humanity? The answers were just beyond their reach, and yet something told Yoren that this was only the beginning. The Watchers had watched them, and now they would decide humanity's fate. The days that followed the Watchers' visit were filled with uncertainty and fear. Commander Zarek was not pleased with the news that Yoren and Kale had brought back from the woods. The symbol, the strange encounter, the Watchers' chilling words, it all pointed to something far beyond their understanding. And the commander's patience was wearing thin. "We can't just sit around waiting for them to decide our fate," Zarek said one morning, his voice tight with anger. "We need to act, and we need to act fast." Yoren stood at attention, his mind racing with thoughts of the Watchers. Their presence, their warning, it was like a storm on the horizon. But what could they do against beings who had been hiding for centuries, watching the world from the shadows? "We've been tracking them for days, sir," Kale spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at him. "But they're like ghosts. Every time we think we're close, they vanish. We can't catch them, and we don't know what they want." Zarek clenched his fists. "Then we will force them to show themselves. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. We have no choice." Yoren felt a shiver run down his spine. A part of him knew that pushing the Watchers wasn't the right path. They were not like any enemy they had faced before. These beings were ancient, far older than humanity. And now they were watching. But there was no turning back. The plan was simple: hunt the Watchers down and make them face humanity. Zarek ordered a full military operation. All units would be on high alert, searching every corner of the forest, every shadow, every hidden path. If the Watchers wanted a confrontation, they would get one. The operation began at dawn, and for the first time in weeks, the camp felt alive with purpose. Soldiers moved in teams, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning the trees and the ground for any sign of movement. But as the hours passed, the silence grew heavier. The Watchers were not making themselves known. Yoren's team, led by him and Kale, ventured deep into the forest. The trees were dense, and the shadows seemed to stretch out, hiding whatever was lurking in the darkness. But Yoren couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He looked over his shoulder often, expecting to see a figure standing in the distance, but there was nothing. Hours passed, and still no sign of the Watchers. It was almost as if they had disappeared entirely. Yoren was beginning to doubt the wisdom of their mission when Kale suddenly held up his hand, signaling for them to stop. "Look," Kale whispered, pointing ahead. Yoren's heart skipped a beat as he saw what Kale was pointing to. In the distance, standing in a clearing, was a figure. Tall, with glowing eyes, a Watcher. But this time it wasn't alone. There were others, more figures emerging from the shadows, their movements fluid and silent. It was as if the forest itself was giving birth to them. Yoren's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a confrontation. This was a reckoning. The Watchers didn't move toward them. Instead, they stood still, their glowing eyes fixed on Yoren and his team. It was as if they were waiting for the humans to make the first move. Yoren felt the weight of their gaze. It was as if they were looking into his very soul. He could feel the power in the air, an energy that made his skin crawl. These beings were not like any enemy they had faced before. They were ancient, powerful, and they were not afraid. Zarek's voice came over the comms, cutting through the silence. "Take them down, soldiers. Do not let them intimidate you. We must show them that humanity will not back down." Yoren's heart pounded in his chest. They were facing something that could destroy them all with a single thought. He glanced at Kale, who was already moving forward, his weapon ready. But Yoren couldn't bring himself to move. Something inside him told him that this was wrong. The Watchers didn't make a move. They simply stood there, watching, waiting. It was as if they knew that humanity's fate was already decided. They didn't need to fight. They had won the moment they revealed themselves. Then one of the Watchers stepped forward. It was the same one they had encountered before, the one with the glowing eyes. "You do not understand," the Watcher said, its voice echoing in Yoren's mind. not in his ears. This is not a fight you can win. This is not a war you can win. We are beyond your reach. Yoren felt the weight of those words. He knew then that they couldn't defeat the Watchers. They were too powerful, too ancient. And the only way forward was to accept the truth that they were not the masters of this world. The Watchers had always been here, watching over humanity, and they would continue to do so, deciding humanity's fate with every passing moment. The Watcher continued, its voice growing softer. We have watched you, observed you. We have given you a chance. But now the world will decide. Yoren's thoughts raced. What do you mean? What will happen to us? The Watcher's gaze softened. The world chooses. It always has. And now we will see if your kind is worthy. The Watchers turned and faded into the shadows, vanishing as silently as they had appeared. For a long time, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence in the forest was deafening. Yoren felt a weight settle on him. The Watchers had spoken the truth. The fate of humanity wasn't in their hands anymore. It had never been. The world would decide. And humanity's future hung in the balance.